There is this massive, almost unbelievable design flaw in the human brain that we just rarely talk about. I mean, we generally operate under this assumption that our minds are constantly trying to maximize our happiness, right?
Right, yeah. Like it's our default setting or something.
Exactly. We think that if we just input the right coordinates, like a better job, a stable relationship, or even just some peace and quiet, our internal navigation system will just automatically guide us there.
Which would be nice, but that is definitely not how it works in reality.
No, not at all. Because when you look at how we actually behave, especially when we're stressed or hurting, it becomes undeniably clear that the brain doesn't always want to be happy. It actually frequently prefers to be miserable as long as that misery is familiar.
It really is the ultimate paradox of human psychology. I
Hmm.
mean, we consciously crave peace, but our nervous systems are often completely, deeply addicted to chaos.
Hmm.
When you strip away, the polished exterior of our daily lives, you find this incredibly messy internal architecture. Self-sabotage isn't just an accident. It's actually a deeply ingrained survival mechanism.
And that messy architecture is exactly what we are wading into today. Welcome to the deep dive, by the way. Today, we are not looking at some clinical sanitized textbook.
Thank goodness.
Right. Instead, we've got our hands on this incredible piece of raw audio. It's essentially a personal audio journal, like a recorded conversation where someone is unpacking their own emotional downward spirals in real time.
Yeah, it's an incredibly unfiltered look at the actual mechanics of burnout, of anger,
Yeah.
and just the incredibly frustrating process of trying to get out of your own way.
Which honestly is infinitely more valuable than a theoretical paper. I mean, when we listen to this journal, we aren't just hearing one person's isolated struggle. We are hearing the baseline operating system of the human ego.
We really are. And so our goal today is to sort of reverse engineer this person's psychological autopsy.
Oh, I like that phrasing.
Thanks.
Mhm.
We want to understand the exact mechanics of why we double down on destructive habits when we're already hurting,
Mm-hmm.
and then, extract the highly practical toolkit this person built to finally break their own cycle.
Because whether you are navigating the fallout of like a high pressure career, or you're feeling completely paralyzed by a depressive rut, or even just trying to manage that background hum of anxiety that comes with modern life, the blueprint for escaping that cycle is hidden right here in this source material.
It really applies to everyone.
Totally. Let me offer a way to visualize the trap we're talking about before we dissect the journal itself. Imagine your mind is a house, and due to some terrible electrical wiring, your thermostat is directly connected to your security system.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So whenever you feel cold and you try to turn up the heat to find some comfort, the security alarm just starts screaming at top volume. So what do? You freeze. Because turning on the heat feels like an emergency. You associate comfort with this immediate, deafening panic.
That is such a vivid analogy.
Right. So today, we are figuring out how to rewire that house.
That electrical mismatch is the perfect way to understand the first major hurdle this audio journal tackles, which is the sheer speed of the downward spiral. And more specifically, the terrifying accelerant that we pour on top of our own sadness, which is shame.
Okay, let's unpack this, because in the recording, the speaker describes this incredibly common but totally devastating cycle. They talk about experiencing a baseline level of sadness. Just,
Yeah.
feeling down.
Which is totally normal.
Exactly, normal human stuff. But the sadness isn't actually the problem. The problem is the immediate secondary reaction. It's that internal voice that kicks in and says, why am I like this? I shouldn't be feeling this. They actively start attacking themselves for the crime of being sad.
Yeah, it's the phenomenon of meta-emotions.
Yeah.
Having an emotion about your emotion.
Right.
From a neurological standpoint, baseline sadness is just a temporary physiological state. It's like a passing weather system. But when you layer shame on top of it, you actually change the chemical composition of the experience. Well, shame is a localized threat response. It basically tells your brain that your sadness makes you defective and therefore vulnerable to being rejected by your tribe.
Which isolates you entirely. I mean, the journal highlights this paralyzing fear. The speaker has this absolute conviction that if they were to pick up the phone and call their family or friends to explain how sad they are, those people would literally laugh at them.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. And that perceived judgment acts like a heavy, airtight lid on a pressure cooker.
That makes so much sense.
Because when you suppress the natural expression of sadness out of this fear of judgment, The energy of that emotion still has to go somewhere, so it turns inward. It becomes this pressurized spiral.
You're no longer just dealing with the original event that made you sad.
Exactly. You are fighting a two-front war against the sadness and your own profound self-hatred. And this is really where the journal introduces a concept from Eckhart Tolle that fundamentally shifts how we have to look at this entire cycle, which is the pain body.
I really want to spend some real time on this because this concept completely reframes human behavior. The speaker in the journal realizes, when they're looking back at their own destructive patterns, that they had essentially become addicted to their own pain.
Which sounds crazy at first.
Right. But they describe this terrifying feeling where if there wasn't chaos, if there wasn't crying and stress, they literally didn't know what to do with themselves. They felt dead inside without the drama.
The pain body is an incredibly useful psychological construct. You have to think of it almost like an energetic parasite that lives in your nervous system, and its only food source is emotional turbulence.
An energetic parasite, that's intense.
It is, but it's accurate. If you've spent years operating in a state of high anxiety, or, say, surviving a turbulent childhood, or enduring a highly toxic relationship, your brain's baseline actually calibrates to that high-octane environment.
Wait, are we really saying people want to be miserable? Because if we look at this from a purely evolutionary standpoint, how does that make any sense? A biological organism is wired to seek safety and avoid pain. The idea that a human being would actively choose misery feels like it violates the core rules of survival.
Yeah, I get that. It does seem to violate survival instincts until you understand how the human brain actually processes safety.
Okay, tell me more.
The brain is not a happiness-seeking machine. It is a prediction machine. It uses a mechanism called predictive processing. It's constantly scanning the environment, trying to guess what will happen next based on past experiences.
So it just wants to know what's coming.
Exactly. To the brain, predictability equals safety. So if your entire life has been chaotic and painful, your brain becomes a master at predicting chaos. It knows all the rules of that dark game.
Okay. So it's the ultimate application of better the devil you know.
Precisely. If you suddenly place that exact same person in a calm, loving, perfectly healthy environment, the brain panics. It has absolutely no map for peace. It cannot predict what will happen in a healthy dynamic. And to the predictive brain, an unpredictable environment is the highest form of danger. So, the pain body essentially demands that you blow up the healthy situation just to return to the familiar, predictable misery where it actually knows how to survive.
That perfectly explains the profound fear the speaker mentions regarding good situations. They ask this brilliant, devastating question in the journal. They say, what if you fail again and everything is perfect?
That line hits so hard.
It does, because think about it. If you are in a terrible, abusive relationship and it ends, your ego is hurt. You can say, well, the relationship was toxic. Anyway, it wasn't my fault.
Right, the environment was the failure, not you.
Exactly. But if you have the perfect job or a truly loving partner and that falls apart, you have no shield. The failure is entirely on you. The vulnerability required to tolerate a genuinely good situation is immense.
It really is.
It's so much easier for the pain body to proactively ruin it, to start a fight or sabotage the opportunity so you can maintain control over the inevitable destruction.
It's a preemptive strike against the terror of the unknown. You train yourself to stay in the familiar pain zone because the vulnerability piece is just packed too heavy. And we see this intolerance of stability manifest outside of relationships too.
Right, it's everywhere.
The pain body doesn't just hijack our interpersonal lives. It dictates our relationship to work, to success, and how we handle our physical energy. Which brings us to a highly specific anecdote in the reporting about burnout.
Oh man, this part of the journal feels like a mirror held up to modern hustle culture. The speaker details a period in their life, a couple of years ago, where they were caught in what they describe as a violent pendulum swing.
Yeah, that's exactly the right term for it.
They talk about working at an absolute sprint, waking up, making sales, talking to clients nonstop, all day, every day, for a week or two straight, just completely redlining their physical and mental energy.
They were operating entirely on cortisol and adrenaline. Basically, a localized, social rewarded manifestation of the pain body. The chaos is simply channeled into productivity.
But you can't outrun your biology forever, right? Inevitably, the speaker hits a massive wall. The engine just seizes up. They reach a point where they literally cannot send another email or make another call.
The physical limit is reached.
Yeah. But instead of resting, instead of allowing the pendulum to come to a halt in the center, the coping mechanism they talk about is a massive, violent swing to the drinking heavily, engaging with toxic substances, and crashing out for 2 or 3 days. They actively transformed from a hyperproductive professional to a completely self-destructive force in the span of an afternoon.
I really want to highlight the physiological devastation of this cycle. The speaker accurately notes that doing this deeply confuses the body and the brain. Let's look at the endocrinology of a vendor like this for a second.
Please do.
You're in that 2-week sales sprint. Your sympathetic nervous system is locked in the on position. You're in a prolonged state of fight or flight. So when the burnout hits, what the body desperately needs is for the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode, to take over. It needs homeostasis.
But silence is terrifying to the pain body.
Exactly. Sitting alone in a quiet room and resting forces you to actually feel the exhaustion and the underlying anxiety you were outrunning. So instead of natural rest, the person uses alcohol or substances as a chemical sledgehammer.
A chemical sledgehammer, wow.
You have to force the brain into a numb state while simultaneously using the chaotic environment of partying to keep the pain body fed with drama. You are essentially pressing the gas pedal and the emergency brake to the floor at the exact same time.
And obviously the transmission completely blows out. The collateral damage is staggering. The journal lists the wake of this pendulum swing: severe legal issues, family fractures, relationship dissolution, and profound health problems. You aren't just hurting yourself, you are a wrecking ball to your entire social ecosystem.
And we have to acknowledge how deeply ingrained this pattern is in our culture.
Oh, absolutely.
We are bombarded with this binary messaging. You must either be relentlessly crushing it, or you are failing. We do not have a societal framework that rewards the slow, steady, unremarkable middle ground. We're taught to sprint until we collapse, which makes a subsequent extreme crash an inevitability, not an anomaly.
So when you wake up in the wreckage of that crash, when the pendulum is at the absolute bottom of its arc, you're hungover, depressed, and the shame spiral we talked about earlier is running at maximum volume, how do you actually start the climb back up? Because you can't just mandate yourself to be healthy or flip a switch.
No, you definitely can't.
The journal actually introduces an incredibly pragmatic, almost painfully simple framework for this moment.
It's a masterclass in behavioral pragmatism. It completely discards the grand, intimidating concepts of healing or transformation and just reduces recovery to the smallest possible unit of human agency.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The speaker uses a food analogy that is so grounded it almost feels silly at first, but it is profoundly accurate. They call it the choice between the pizza and the salad.
I love this analogy so much.
It's so relatable. They explain that when you are in the depths of that depression, when your will is completely sapped, you are presented with a micro-choice. You can eat the heavy, greasy pizza, or you can eat a salad. And the speaker admits with refreshing honesty that sometimes they still just eat the pizza. They say, whatever, I don't care, I'm just going to put this in my body.
Right, because the depression has temporarily paralyzed their executive function.
Exactly. But the critical insight is what happens when they manage to make the other choice. They explain that if you can muster just enough willpower to say, I'm going to eat the better food or I'm going to do 10 minutes of movement, it shifts the entire trajectory.
And they are very clear about the results of that, too.
Yes. Now they are very clear. Eating the salad does not cure the depression. It doesn't instantly make you feel 1,000,000 times better.
That realistic expectation is the linchpin of the entire strategy. If you eat the salad expecting it to act as a pharmaceutical intervention for your trauma, you will be deeply disappointed.
And your pain body will use that disappointment to justify ordering 3 pizzas the next day.
Precisely. The utility of the salad has nothing to do with its nutritional profile.
Then what is the actual mechanism at play here? Like, if the salad doesn't fix the brain chemistry, why does it matter?
It's about the reestablishment of an internal locus of control. When you're trapped in the downward spiral or that pendulum swing, you feel entirely powerless. The pain body is driving the car, and you are basically locked in the trunk.
Right.
By making a single, microscopic, positive choice, drinking a glass of water, walking to the mailbox, choosing the salad, you are momentarily kicking the pain body out of the driver's seat. You are proving to your own nervous system that you are still capable of generating an action that serves your well-being.
It's proof of life. It's a tiny beacon in the dark saying, I am still in here, and I still have a say in what happens next. But let me challenge this slightly, because this is a big question. The speaker says, I'll still eat the pizza, I'll put this food in my body. If we remove the friction and tell ourselves that it is completely fine to cave to the depressive urge and eat the pizza, aren't we just enabling our own self-sabotage? Doesn't saying it's okay to eat the pizza give us permission to just wallow?
That is a very common concern, but it misunderstands the anatomy of the shame cycle we talked about. We have to differentiate between enablement and patience.
Okay, break that down for me.
If you eat the pizza and then immediately begin the meta-emotional attack, I'm a failure, I have no discipline, I'm going to be stuck like this forever,
Yeah.
you are creating a massive psychological wound. And how do we typically soothe psychological wounds?
We seek comfort.
Right, which often means eating a second pizza to numb the pain of the shame caused by the first pizza.
The shame demands more of the very behavior that caused it.
Precisely. The radical pragmatism of the journal is the removal of the shame tax. The speaker is advocating for profound patience. You eat the pizza, you acknowledge that you made a choice aligned with your current low-energy state, and you simply pivot your attention to making sure the very next choice is slightly better.
You treat the slip-up as a data point, not a character flaw.
It's the difference between taking a wrong turn on the highway and calmly taking the next exit to correct your route, versus taking a wrong turn and deciding to drive your car straight into a concrete barrier because you missed your exit.
That makes perfect sense, that gentle, immediate course correction. But, this quiet, depressive state isn't the only emotional extreme the journal covers. While sadness might make you retreat and reach for the heavy food, there's another emotion the speaker wrestles with that is highly explosive.
Yes.
And the mechanics of dealing with it require a completely different set of tools. Let's talk about the anatomy of anger.
Anger is a fascinating contrast to the depression we just discussed. Sadness is an energy deficit, it flattens you. Anger is an energy surplus, but it is highly volatile, ungrounded electricity.
The journal gets very intense here. The speaker details how their internal hurt and fear used to manifest externally. And we aren't talking about quiet resentment.
Not at all.
They talk about violently punching holes in walls, constantly picking arguments, and actively attacking the people around them. They describe it as a desperate attempt to project the agony they felt inside out into the physical world.
If we tie this back to the pain body, physical violence against inanimate objects or verbal violence against loved ones is the pain body demanding an audience.
Demanding an audience. That's a powerful way to put it.
The individual lacks the internal processing power to digest their own fear or hurt, so they externalize it. They turn their psychological suffering into a physical spectacle to force the world to bear witness to their pain.
It's essentially saying, I refuse to hold this fire alone. I'm going to burn the room down so you all have to feel the heat with me. But the method the speaker develops to counteract this is remarkable. It's a purely physiological hack. They realized they couldn't think their way out of the rage, so they started using intense physical activity to process it.
The physical exhaustion method.
Yeah. They mentioned playing tennis, going for aggressive walks, running, using the physical vessel to burn the anger out. They even share a story about being in Bali, walking deep into the woods or the jungle, and just screaming into a pillow as loud as humanly possible until there was absolutely nothing left.
The logic behind this method relies on an undeniable biological limitation of the human body. The speaker poses a brilliant challenge in the recording. They say, try to be mad for 5 days straight.
And they claim it's impossible.
And from a neurological and endocrinological standpoint, they're absolutely right.
Walk me through the mechanics of that impossibility. Why can't we sustain rage?
Because true, explosive anger is an acute survival response. It is driven by the immediate flooding of your system with adrenaline and cortisol. Your heart rate skyrockets. Blood flow is diverted from your digestive tract to your major muscle groups. Your pupils dilate.
Your body is mobilizing to fight a tiger to the death.
Exactly. And maintaining that level of physiological arousal requires an immense amount of metabolic energy. You are rapidly burning through your body's ATP. That's the energy currency of your cells.
So you just run out of gas.
You simply do not have the battery life to run the fight-or-flight system at maximum capacity for days on end. It will forcefully shut itself down to prevent a total biological collapse.
So by going to the tennis court or sprinting in the woods, the speaker isn't just distracting themselves. They are actively and intentionally accelerating the depletion of those chemicals. Think about the visceral reality of that imagery. Imagine playing a game of tennis while you are blindingly furious. Every time the racket connects with the ball, you are not engaging in a sport. You are using the physical impact to ground the emotional lightning running through your nervous system.
You are providing the fight that your body's survival mechanism is screaming for, but you are doing it in a safe, contained environment that doesn't destroy your relationships or the drywall in your house.
And the journal describes the aftermath so vividly. You sprint the track, you hit the ball, you scream into the pillow until your vocal cords give out, and eventually you have to sit down.
You have no choice.
Right. You are drenched in sweat, your muscles are shaking, your lungs are burning, and you are literally physically too exhausted to sustain the narrative of the anger. You sit there and your brain basically says, I would love to keep being mad about this, but we simply do not have the calories left to care.
It creates a forced physiological reset. When you are vibrating with rage, your amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, is completely overriding your prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for logic and reasoning.
And you can't reason with an amygdala on fire.
You cannot reason with a brain that thinks it is fighting for its life. The physical exhaustion method starves the amygdala of its fuel. And when the amygdala power is down, the prefrontal cortex can finally come back online.
Which opens the door to the single most important phase of this entire process. Once the explosive energy is drained out of the body, once the internal fire alarm has been starved of electricity and stops ringing, what is left? You are left with quiet.
Yeah.
And in that exhausted quiet, you can finally engage in real introspection.
You cannot investigate the source of a fire while you are actively throwing buckets of water on the flames. The exhaustion creates the necessary clearing in the smoke.
The speaker describes moving from the highly reactive state, the punching, the screaming, the repetitive loop of, I'm so angry, I'm so sad, to asking a fundamentally different question. They sit in the quiet and ask, why? Why am I actually feeling these emotions?
Moving from the what to the why is the actual threshold of emotional maturity.
And they highlight a massive prerequisite for this. We usually spend our lives just pushing our feelings aside. We have meetings, we have bills to pay, we have to keep the facade up. So we shove the emotions in a drawer until a drawer breaks and the feelings, as the speaker says, hit us in the face.
To interrogate the why, you first have to surrender to the what's.
Elaborate on that.
Well, if you are still trapped in the shame spiral from the beginning of our deep dive, if you are still saying, I am an idiot for being angry about this, you are blinding yourself to the root cause. You have to validate the reality of the emotion before you can investigate its origin. You can't ask why if you're still denying the what's.
It requires a shift in how we view our own minds. Imagine your emotional state as the dashboard of a car. When the check engine light comes on, the anger, the wall punching, the bender, that is the equivalent of taking a hammer and smashing the dashboard so you don't have to look at the light anymore.
That's a perfect analogy.
The light is annoying, it's anxiety-inducing, so you break it. But breaking the light doesn't fix the engine. What the speaker is doing now, through exhaustion and sitting in the quiet, is finally pulling the car over, popping the hood, and actually looking inside.
And what they find under the hood is almost always a shock.
Oh, completely.
The journal details this profound realization. When the speaker finally slows down enough to ask themselves, hey, Rock, why are you feeling like this?
Oh.
The root cause is rarely a massive existential crisis. It is usually something incredibly small.
It's so small, it's almost comical. They say it comes out to be something so fixable that they end up laughing at themselves later. Like, oh man, if I just took a second to realize what was actually going on.
Think about the mechanics of this in daily life. How many times have you been absolutely convinced that you need to blow up your entire life? Quit your job, break up with your partner, move to a different city because you feel a pervasive sense of rage and dissatisfaction.
I mean, we've all been there.
Right. But if you actually pull the car over and open the hood, you realize that the root cause isn't a fundamental incompatibility with your life. The root cause is that you haven't slept more than 5 hours a night for a week, your blood sugar is crashing, and your partner used a slightly sharp tone of voice in a text message.
The pain body took a chewed wire, the lack of sleep, and convinced you the entire engine was going to explode.
Precisely. Introspection strips away the catastrophic narrative and leaves you with the mechanical facts. And once you have the facts, you can address the actual need, rather than fighting a phantom war.
But staring at the facts isn't the end of the line. Once you realize why you are hurting, you need an active tool to pull yourself out of the psychological pit and actively shift your reality. You need something to anchor you. And the source provides an antidote for this that is shockingly effective and almost aggressive.
This next segment is arguably the most potent strategy in the entire recording. It reclaims the concept of gratitude from the pastel-colored, toxic positivity of modern wellness culture and deploys it as a biological override switch.
Exactly. When we hear gratitude journal, we usually roll our eyes. We think of forced optimism. But The journal presents a core thesis that isn't about feeling warm and fuzzy. It is a statement of physiological fact, and it is this: you cannot be sad and grateful at the same time.
They are mutually exclusive neural pathways.
To illustrate this, the speaker shares a deeply raw story about a friend of theirs named Sean Lawrence. The speaker was at absolute rock bottom. They describe being literally on the ground, crying uncontrollably, navigating a painful breakup, and simultaneously withdrawing from toxic substances.
The pain body was in total control.
Total control. And Sean sits down next to them. But Sean doesn't do what most people do. He doesn't pat them on the back and say everything happens for a reason or time heals all wounds.
Because those platitudes are functionally useless to someone in an acute crisis.
Right. Instead, Sean essentially acts like a prosecuting attorney of reality. He starts rapid-firing, highly specific, aggressively grounded questions at the speaker. He asks, are you happy that we have a homestead? Are you happy that we have food being brought to us? Are you happy that we have these sheets? Are you happy that you're breathing? Are you happy that you're alive? He relentlessly forces the speaker to answer these questions through their tears and withdrawal.
The architecture of Sean's intervention is masterful. We have to understand what happens to human consciousness during an acute depressive or anxious episode. The mind entirely detaches from the present moment.
Where does it go?
It projects backward into the past, ruminating on regrets and the pain of the breakup. And it projects forward into the future, obsessing over the fear of being alone or the terror of withdrawal. The mind is everywhere except the room it is currently in.
It's floating in a void of pure narrative.
Precisely. Yeah. What Sean did was drop a massive, heavy anchor. He didn't ask the speaker to be grateful for abstract concepts. He asked about the literal sheets on the bed, the literal food entering their mouths, the physical expansion of their lungs. He forced the speaker's consciousness out of the time-traveling narrative of the pain body and slammed it violently back into the immediate, undeniable physical present.
So what does this all mean? The neuroscience behind why this works is fascinating. You cannot run the sympathetic nervous system circuit for existential despair while simultaneously engaging the neural circuits required to process profound present-moment appreciation. It is a system override. Sean forced the speaker's brain to process the undeniable data of their own survival.
And it creates a profound template that the speaker then adopts for themselves.
Yes, the journal explains that the speaker now uses this exact technique when they are alone and feel the downward spiral starting. They don't try to intellectualize their way out of the sadness. They literally just start looking at the physical objects around them.
Grounding exercises.
Exactly. They will look at a couch and force themselves to acknowledge, this is a beautiful couch. I am sitting in a beautiful home. But the example that stopped me cold was when the speaker talked about looking at their own hands.
The ultimate reduction of the ego.
They describe looking down at their hands and actively forcing the realization, they're alive, they're here, they're not cut off, I am able to work and do things with them. Think about the profound recalibration that requires. When your ego is screaming that your life is over because your relationship failed or your career took a hit, staring at your own intact hands and feeling genuine gratitude that they are attached to your body is the ultimate ego death.
It's undeniable.
It strips away all the societal metrics of success and forces you to acknowledge the absolute baseline miracle of biological function.
It starves the pain body completely. The pain body wants to argue about fairness, status, and emotional validation. It has no defense against the raw, undeniable fact of a functioning hand. The speaker mentions that you can apply this gratitude anywhere in a prison cell, lying in a hospital bed, or stranded on a deserted island. As long as you possess consciousness and breath, you possess the raw materials necessary to run the gratitude override.
But the speaker is honest about how difficult this is. They admit that when you are deeply sad, it feels incredibly scary to attempt this. And that makes sense, right? Because the pain body views this gratitude not as a relief, but as a lethal threat.
Oh, absolutely.
The friction you feel when you try to be thankful for your coffee while you are depressed isn't just stubbornness. It is the pain body fighting for its life, trying to keep you engaged in the misery it needs to survive.
It is an active wrestling match for the steering wheel of your nervous system. And this brings up a broader point made in the source, which is how we learn from others and build our mental health toolkits. How did the speaker learn this? They learned a gratitude anchor from Sean. They learned other techniques from other places. They didn't invent this out of thin air.
They engineered a custom approach. The journal is very explicit about this in the final section. The speaker emphasizes that they do not rely on one definitive guide or one book or one single guru to fix their life.
Which is so refreshing.
It really is. They describe their recovery as a patchwork process. They pull a little piece from a YouTube video here, a concept from an author there, and practical interventions from friends like Sean or Trina. They curate their own survival toolkit.
This is a vital point for anyone listening. When people are in deep emotional pain, the instinct is to find a savior. We want one therapist, one philosophy, or one guru to hand us the master key that unlocks all our trauma.
We want the easy fix.
But outsourcing your psychological architecture to a single external source is just another way to avoid the hard work of introspection we talked about earlier. A custom toolkit means you are taking ownership. You realize that your mind is a unique lock, and you have to forge a unique key.
And the way the speaker learned from Sean is just as important as what they learned. The journal explicitly points out that Sean didn't preach. He didn't sit the speaker down and give them a lecture on the dangers of substance abuse or the necessity of a clean life. Sean taught entirely by passive example.
The mechanism of modeling behavior.
Exactly. Sean just lived his life in proximity to the chaos. He ate cleanly, he did his yoga, he meditated, and he maintained ironclad boundaries regarding toxic substances and environments. And the speaker notes that just witnessing that quiet, consistent equilibrium forced a massive cognitive dissonance.
He holds up a mirror.
Yeah, it forced the speaker to look in the mirror and ask, what am I going to do? I see this undeniable example of peace right in front of me while my life is on fire.
We are deeply social, mimetic creatures. Our mirror neurons are constantly absorbing and replicating the emotional states of the people around us. If your entire social circle operates on the pendulum swing, sprinting and crashing, partying and withdrawing, your brain assumes that is the baseline reality of human existence.
It's all you know.
Right. When you inject someone like Sean into that environment, his very existence acts as a challenge to the pain body. It proves that an alternative is possible. You don't always need someone to dive into the fire to fix you. Sometimes you just need someone to stand calmly outside the fire to prove that the outside world actually exists.
That is so beautifully put. And as you gather these tools, as you observe the Seans in your life, as you practice the gratitude override, as you exhaust the anger, you begin to develop a new internal compass. And the journal concludes with a major recent realization that acts as the ultimate master key for this entire process. It is the ability to finally distinguish between the two dominant voices in your head, intuition and anxiety.
This distinction is the absolute pinnacle of the self-awareness journey outlined in this recording. It is the operational difference between a life driven by the pain body and a life driven by authentic agency.
The speaker explains that they have finally learned how to parse the physical and mental sensations of these two forces. They describe intuition as coming from a deeply calm place. The thoughts and decisions flow naturally. There is no frantic buzzing in the mind.
It's peaceful.
The example they give is so mundane but perfect. Just sitting quietly and having the thought, you know what, I really feel like walking over there, getting a coffee and reading a book.
Notice the directional energy of that feeling. It is a gentle, steady pull towards something positive and restorative.
Yes, a pull. But anxiety, which is the voice of the ego and the pain body, operates with a completely different physics. The speaker notes that anxiety is entirely reactive. The internal monologue is, I feel bad, I feel uncomfortable, therefore I need to go drink, or I need to go smoke.
Let's break down the somatic reality of this intuition versus anxiety framework, because it is the ultimate litmus test for decision-making. Anxiety is a frantic push away from discomfort. It demands immediate, urgent action. It feels like a buzzing in your chest, a tightness in your throat.
It's pure panic.
It tells you that if you don't act right now, if you don't send the angry text, if you don't take the drink, if you don't swing the pendulum, you are going to die. It's the security alarm screaming.
Well, intuition is the quiet hum of the actual thermostat.
Exactly. Intuition does not scream, it whispers. It does not require you to flee from a negative state. It simply invites you to step toward a more aligned one. If you are ever standing at a crossroads, unsure of what to do, you can run a diagnostic test. Is the energy behind this choice pushing me frantically away from a fear, or is it pulling me calmly toward my own peace?
The push of the pain body versus the pull of your actual self. That is a brilliant framework to carry forward. And, as we begin to wrap up this deep dive, I want to circle back to a moment of profound vulnerability at the very end of the journal.
Oh, the part about YouTube.
Yes. The speaker talks about the sheer relief of shared experience. They describe literally sitting alone, watching YouTube videos of other people talking about these exact struggles and just crying. Not out of sadness, but out of the overwhelming, exhausting relief of realizing I am not the only person in my mind going crazy with this.
The dissolution of shame through shared narrative.
And honestly, if you are listening to this right now, tuning into us unpacking this stranger's audio journal, you are participating in that exact same mechanism. By seeking out this conversation, you are actively engaging your intuition. You are pulling yourself toward understanding rather than letting the anxiety of your own mind isolate you in the dark.
You are curating your own custom toolkit in real time.
So let's look back at the map we've drawn today out of this raw audio. We started by recognizing the terrifying reality of the pain body, the unsettling truth that our brains will actively sabotage our happiness simply because chaotic misery feels more predictable and safe than the vulnerable unknown.
We dissected the pendulum swing, understanding the brutal cost of sprinting through burnout, only to crash into extreme, self-destructive coping mechanisms.
We found the absolute floor of our own agency with the pizza versus salad pragmatism, learning that the goal isn't immediate healing, but simply the slow accumulation of microscopic choices that prove we are still in control.
We examined how to process anger through physical exhaustion, burning the adrenaline out of your system to quiet the mind, so you can finally open the hood and ask why the check engine light came on.
And we learned how to deploy gratitude not as a passive platitude, but as a grounding anchor, using the undeniable physical reality of our immediate environment to violently anchor our consciousness to the present moment. All of this culminating in the quiet ability to finally hear the whisper of intuition over the screaming alarm of anxiety.
The journey outlined in this journal is not clean. It's not a straight line. It is a messy, deeply human evolution. From someone who used to project their agony by punching holes in drywall, to someone who can sit quietly, differentiate between a frantic push and a calm pull, and find profound peace just by looking at the hands attached to their arms. It is living proof that rewiring the house is possible.
It is absolutely possible. Thank you so much for breaking down the intricate mechanics of this with me. The depth of this framework is just astounding.
It was an absolute privilege to unpack it with you.
And to you, listening, as we finally pull the car over, turn off the engine, and sit in the quiet at the end of today's deep dive, I want to leave you with one final question to chew on.
A good one, I hope.
We've talked so much about how we cling to our familiar anxieties, how we feed the pain body because we know all the rules of that dark, chaotic game. We know exactly who we are when we are struggling. But I want you to imagine, just for a few seconds, what if you simply dropped it? If you stripped away your pain body right now, if you stopped feeding your familiar anxieties and let go of the chaos you're used to carrying, who would you actually be without it? What if the scariest, most terrifying thing in the world isn't failure, but discovering exactly how peaceful, quiet, and beautiful your life is actually allowed to be? Until next time, keep looking under the hood.